welcome to today's webinar. My name is John Mullins. We'll go into that more in just a few moments, and I'm with Themis. And today's title of our webinar is going to take a look at both some 18C and 19C features in Oracle. Both of those kind of snuck up on us, so it's a good time to kind of go back and review what was out there and talk about those a little bit. We may also have some future webinars that kind of grow out of this particular webinar as well. So there may be a few topics in here that certainly deserve our future more detailed attention to those. So look for those in the future. A couple of things on this particular page here. You see my email address, jmullins@themisinc.com. So that's the best way to get a hold of me as far as questions go with today's webinar. We just have a short period of time, so going into any questions online, we'll cut into our time there. So take a note of some questions you might have along the way. Send those to me. I'll get back to you quickly on those. You can also go out to themisinc.com and take a look at our website, which has a listing of all our courses, schedules, points of contact, things like that. Also, our past webinars are out there as well. So today's webinar, the slides are currently out there posted on our website. If you go out to themisinc.com, along the top, you'll see a link to the webinars page. And right now you can see the slides. A little bit down the road, either late today or tomorrow or sometime, you'll see the actual recording of today's webinar also. So I invite you to go out there and take a look at some of the past webinars. There's webinars not only on just Oracle, but you can tell your friends, DB2, Java, performance tuning, SQL, PL SQL, PL SQL, like I said there, for all kinds of things for DB2, other databases, Oracle, other languages, things like that. So take a look out there, see what you see. And you can also follow us on Twitter at Themis Training. All right, so let's go ahead and get started here today. Again, welcome. Again, my name is John Mullins. I see some of the names that are out there. Welcome back from either classes that you've taken or previous webinars you've attended. I'm with Themis. I've been using Oracle and other relational databases for over 34 years. So I started with Oracle version 5 a long time ago. Boy, things have changed since then. I'm also an Oracle Certified Professional DBA and a Certified Technical Trainer, and I've taught quite a few classes over the years, both online, in-person, customized, all those. And we'll talk more about those a little bit later in the presentation. So a little bit about Themis, if you're not familiar with Themis at all. They've been around for a long time as well, and they really teach a lot of courses over lots of different areas, a lot of new courses out there too. So if you haven't been out to our website in a while, notice that we also have courses on Python, PostgreSQL, MongoDB, lots of new courses out there added to the courses that we've been teaching for a long time. So you can get a list out there. Again, there's the links for those out there for you. All right, if you go out to that website, you may notice here's some classes or courses that are related to what we're talking about today. So we have new features types classes, 18C, there's 12C out there too. Not everybody's up to the latest level yet because these are coming at us fast and furious. So take a look out here. Here's all the new feature type classes. And then we have the general classes too, like Introduction to SQL, PL SQL, Database Administration and such. And those are all updated to the latest release. So it's everything up to Oracle 18C or 19C, whatever they've been upgraded to so far. So everything that was out there previously is still in the book because you might be at a lower version there. So no worry about particular classes that are offered for particular versions. You'll get what you need out of those. All right, what are we doing here today? Well, today, like I said, we're going to look at some 18C, 19C new features. And like I said, some of these new features will demand maybe a presentation, a webinar down the road for more detail. These are more of reminders. I got a little bit of code in here just so you can kind of see what's going on with each of these features. Keep in mind too that 18C and 19C, there are various sources that even from Oracle, that say those are really just later releases of Oracle 12c. Even 19c is in that category. So there are not as many new features related to 18c and 19c as like you would have been used to with Oracle 12c or 11g, for example. So I just picked out a kind of a handful of each. I threw the 18c in here because I think we have to kind of get used to this new version release schedule from Oracle, right? We're getting this major version, once a year, and then maybe some smaller fixes once a quarter. And so now we're getting these new numbers that are based upon the year that they're actually released, and that's why we get the 18c and 19c. Some of you, if you're not deep into your Oracle environment and the releases of those and the licensing of those, are like, okay, we just put in 12c and now it's 18c. What happened to 13, 14, 15, and so on? Well, Oracle changed the release schedule there. So these are coming out, quite often now. We have to pay attention to when previous releases might be de-supported a little bit more closely as well. So 18c came out. A lot of people were still in 12c, maybe release 2. Like I said, 18c, 19c are really just future releases or later releases of 12c there. All right, so keep in mind, you may look at one of these slides and say, oh, that says that's a new feature of 18c, and then you may go out and look in the documentation. It may actually refer to it as a 12c new feature. All right, let's jump in and take a look at some of these. Some of these, if you're already in 18c or have been doing some research on it, will look familiar to you. All right, this one has some potential here. We're going to look at kind of 5 or so 18c new features, and then we'll look at 5 or so 19c new features here. And again, if you have any questions along the way, just jot those down and send them to me in an email. That's the best way to get those to me, jmullins@themisinc.com. All right, so if you've been using Oracle for a while, you know that Oracle's always had, or for a long time anyway, they've had Oracle global temporary tables, okay? And, the title of it makes it sound like, well, that's kind of like what this is. We may, if you're not familiar with a global temporary table, it has a little bit special syntax compared to creating a table. We actually say create global temporary table. It puts an Oracle temporary table in the temporary table space, so it's not located in the same places that you would normally store your regular tables out there. And the actual structure or definition of that table is not temporary at all. The data that's in that table is temporary. So we can define for a global temporary table, when does our temporary data go away? Does it go away when we end a transaction, or does it go away when we end a session? Okay, but if we end the session and we come back in, our global temporary table is still there. It's just that the data is gone for our particular session that we had previously. Well, with private temporary tables, a little bit different. Okay, they kind of have the same two options as we had before with the global temporary tables. When do the data go away? Well, at the end of a transaction or a session. However, in addition to the data going away, with these, the actual table definition, the structure that was taking up space, it goes away as well. So these are actually stored in memory, okay, rather than in the temporary table space itself. So, if you take some of the Oracle classes, or if you're a DBA, you're familiar with the different memory structures that are out there. So we have a temporary table space, which is physical, but we also have things like a PGA, or a process global area, that contains temporary data or temporary objects. It's a workspace. All right, let's take a look at these. I have some code in here on these particular ones. Creating it is simple. Just like a global temporary table, except we're going to say create private temporary table. And then we have an on-commit. Here's our two options: on-commit drop definition or on-commit preserve definition. Okay, so if it's on-commit, dropping it, you can see the details down there below. okay, or on commit preserve definition. That means it'll go away at the end of the session, the second one there. So it's kind of, what is it doing? Which maybe we were doing manually ourselves in the past. You know, we may have these temporary tables out there in place that were global temporary tables as part of a multi-process or multi-step process. Maybe it's a batch job, something like that. And you know, we load some data into a temporary table, we do something with it, maybe we get some rows, we do some summarizations, and then we take the result of that and it goes into a second stage and a third stage and a fourth stage along the way there. And then maybe the first step is just to clean everything up. Maybe we drop the temporary tables, global temporary tables at the end of the process, at the beginning of the process, just to make sure they're not there. Well, that's what the benefit of this one's doing for us. It's taking care of that. So it's getting rid of the actual table out of memory in this case, not off of your temporary table space physical location. So I think that could prove, for people that are currently using global temporary tables, I think this is a nice, I'll call it an enhancement or add-on to, say, a global temporary table. You can still do global temporary tables, but this will be a new feature you can take advantage of. All right, let's take a look here at the next one. All right, some of you, if you're PL/SQL users, this might apply to you. You might be familiar with a package called DBMS_HProf, or Hierarchical Profiler. In our troubleshooting, debugging, and tuning PL/SQL class, we go through this particular package in detail. It's one of the early chapters in there. So what this profiler does is, let's say we have a PL/SQL store procedure that's running. And it may call other programs or not, but let's say the procedure takes 2 hours to run, and that's not acceptable. We need to know, for that 2-hour window that it was running in and consuming resources, you know, what took up the most time? You know, our program might be 1,000 lines of code. Out of that 2 hours, where was the time spent? And that's what this particular package does for you. So the package itself has been around for a while. What's new in 18C are some new procedures and functions within the package. You see the first sub-bullet there says that a new DBMS_HProf procedure. So there's a new procedure that will help with the setup of this, because it creates some tables on the front end. It loads the data as it's gathering information about your running program that you can then query at the end of it there. It's what they've tried to do, hopefully to get more people to use this particular feature, is to make the setup and the use of it a little bit easier. And that's what this new feature is all about here. Okay, I like this particular package a lot, and I say that when we go into the actual class itself, because you'll look at it and you'll see, okay, here's line 1, 2, 3 in the report that it produces. Oh, line 10 out of the 2 hours used 80% of the 2 hours. What was line 10? Oh, it was an SQL statement or something like that, or an update, whatever it was. So I can narrow it down, you know, which lines of code were consuming the highest percentage of the time, of the overall time, and then I can start there and focus on that, trying to troubleshoot and debug my program. So just be aware that the Hierarchical Profiler has some new programs that are part of it here. I like that a lot. All right, if you're a DBA type person, or even if you're not, you can certainly suggest this to a DBA. All right, how many people have had or know of other people or processes that have had SQL queries or such that are running way too long? You know, they're consuming a lot of resources, memory and IO and CPU. And you know, yesterday it ran fine, but today it's, wow, what's going on here? Well, we know that, you know, DBAs have several different ways that they can terminate a process. So they can go out there, they can have tools like Enterprise Manager where they can kill a session, or they can do an alter system command and kill a session. That kills your session. So the new feature here in 18C was, there's a new option with the alter system command where we can just cancel the SQL statement and not cancel or terminate the session. Okay, that's pretty cool. We like that too. You can see the full syntax of it there at the bottom of that screen. Ultra system cancel SQL. And then there's some of those options that are inside those single quotes that are optional. So I need a session ID, that's the SID. I need a serial number. The combination of those two uniquely identify every SQL statement that's running. But I can also specify, which instance of Oracle this SQL statement is running in, and I can be very specific and just give it the SQL ID. Now, I would have to look up the SQL ID either through, if I'm a DBA, through one of my tools, or I could do a query myself and look at a view like $SQL. $SQL will show me the SQL IDs that are associated with various SQL statements that have either run and are done or are currently running. Okay, so that's kind of nice because, if this was a multi-step process and I'm on whatever step 3 and that particular statement, maybe it runs on its own, it's isolated. Other steps aren't dependent on that particular step. If it starts to run away and it's running way too long and it's causing some problems on the system for everybody, everybody thinks the system's slow. In the past, if I were to terminate that session, then steps 4, 5, and 6, they would never get executed unless somehow your steps there had a step in there to reconnect your session to the instance. So with this, if this particular step, the steps that follow it aren't dependent on it, I can cancel the SQL and it'll immediately then go to step 4, 5, and 6. So, which maybe you want it to do that, and that's okay, but maybe you don't either. Maybe step 5 is dependent on step 4. In that case, maybe you just want to cancel the whole session. If they're not dependent on each other, it'd be good to cancel these individually. So that's kind of nice. I think external tables are one of those underutilized features in Oracle. They've been around for a while, where if you have data outside the database, you can access it actually with an SQL statement like select. So people use these things for like log files or audit files, or just even data files that maybe are large and the load step is not acceptable as far as time goes. So with an external table, I can create an external table. It's usually just a text file. And it could be, the text file could be a new file every day. It comes from an overnight batch job that goes out and reads several resources, combines the data in some programs, writes the output to a text file, and then you can access it with a select statement. All right, well, that external table that's created, it has to be created first. Even though the text file is being replaced every night, the external table definition that's in the database is permanent. Once you create it, it's in the database. Regardless of your file changing, the external table's definition stays the same. Okay, so somebody'd have to have permissions to create an external table, and there's certain limitations with those as well. With this, notice the title of the new feature, Inline External Tables. I'm going to show you an example of the code on the next page. What it's going to do, you don't have to create the external table itself with SQL or with DDL. So the definition of it's not going to be stored in the database once you run this particular statement. So it's just a temporary thing. It's almost like a temporary external table, but it has no physical definition inside your metadata, inside your data dictionary. So here's an example just on this page. They're creating a new table here. Notice there's a new keyword here called external. So we're doing they're selecting every column from external, and then this particular table really doesn't have a name, but it does have a file name and a location and such. So you see we list, just like with regular tables, some columns like ID and time ID and prod ID, quantity sold, amount sold, their definitions. And then down here is the part that we normally see with external tables when we actually create them physically. Or if you're familiar with Oracle's SQL Loader tool, it has the same type of syntax here. And that's why you see that it says type is Oracle Loader. So this is almost like a table that's an Oracle Loader type. So remember, the data is located outside the database. The benefit to you if you're a developer is if you need to access some data outside the database and you want to take advantage of the power of SQL. A lot of people think the power of SQL with your selects, your different functions, your where clauses, sorting or whatever is a lot more powerful than, say, a regular editor, text editor like VI or Notepad or something like that. So if you want to there, you can do that. Let me jump back there real quick. I went too far. There we go, right there. And so you can see that down in there. We do have to have a directory name within the database, but you can see down here we just specify how's the file formatted. Oh, here we're saying it's the different fields in the file are terminated with commas. The file name is called orders_2018.csv, and then we can also put some other options on there, like if we try to load one of the rows from that file and it violates a constraint or such, should we stop? Should we go on? How many of those errors are we going to tolerate? Things like that. So what this does is it eliminates the need to create a physical definition in the database for an external table or external data. I like external tables a lot. They were put out, the primary purpose for them a long time ago was in the ETL process, in a data warehouse type of environment. You extract data from various resources, you perform some summarizations or some files, programs against them, and then the last step is you load the data into your Oracle database or whatever database you're going into. And a lot of times the load step is the step that takes the longest. Well, what if we didn't have to load it? We just left it out there in a file. Now remember, the intent was for data warehouse type of environments, decision support type of environments, which if Oracle will define those as environments where your queries typically don't use indexes. This is an old definition from Oracle, but this is an older feature too, external tables. So their initial intent was to be for those type of environments. Well, then somebody realized, hey, I got an idea. I could use this for any text file, right? Oh, well, what about for log files from your batch jobs? Well, I can run SQL against my log files from my batch jobs. I can run SQL against audit files. I can run SQL against any text file. So this feature at least gives us a little bit of a shortcut. And also, if it's difficult in your environment to get certain privileges, then this would be a good thing for you if you're already using external tables, or maybe today's discussion has sparked some ideas. Hey, I can use an external table there. All right, this is one that sometimes you'll see listed with 12C new features. And some of it was in 12C, and they've added some stuff to it in 18C as well. Approximate. You remember our top N type query processing that we saw in some of the earlier versions of Oracle for SQL, where we could say something like, I only want to see the top 5 rows from this particular query based on this, or whatever. Or show me the top 5 salaries. How's that? Or the top 5 orders based on my customers. Those types of things. Well, those could be pretty resource intensive and there's different functions for those too. Remember some of the analytical functions we have, like rank and any of the other ones that are related to that type of thing. They can be, like I said, resource intensive. So what these are, there's new functions. There's one called approximate rank, approximate sum, approximate count. There's some others too. And we can code our SQL to use those functions directly. In other words, use that function name directly in your SQL. And it goes out and will give you an approximate result depending on what you're looking for. And some might be thinking, well, gee whiz, what if the approximate is way off from the actual? That could affect what I'm trying to do here and affect the outcome and affect maybe decisions that are being made upon this data here. Oracle will say that the differences should be very small. The benefit to doing this should be maybe obvious to us. The benefit to doing approximate versus actual is approximate should be faster. So if we've, nowadays we've got so much data in our tables. We've got people with 60 billion rows in tables or more in a single table that we're joining with other tables, and maybe we're doing some analytical processing against those. So these are meant to kind of speed that up, because sometimes it doesn't really matter to us, depending on what we're trying to do. Is this the actual result, or is this an approximate result? Now, one of the things it will provide for us, which I like, we'll see it on the second one right after this one. Here's an example. Return the 2 most commonly worked jobs in each department. So you can see where it's used down here in the order by. You can see it's in the having as well. We have in the having, we have approximate rank, and then I'm doing an order by approximate count, which is something we're selecting up here in our expression list for our select statement. All right, take a look at this next one though. This one's kind of cool. Display the difference between the actual and the approximate value found in the query result set. All right, take a look what I got here. I have this approximate count right here with an asterisk followed by approximate count, and I've passed it. Instead of just an asterisk, I've also passed it another parameter here called max error. And what that'll do is that'll give you the actual. So when I run this query, which I'm not going to do here, but you may modify it in one of your environments and test it out if you're up to this particular version. The first approximate count will show me the approximate number, and the second one with the max error will show me the actual number. Then I can see for myself, what's the difference between these two? How much of a difference is there between the approximate and the actual? That kind of gives me some level of confidence in these functions that are out there. Now, one other thing I want to mention about these new functions is, and this is something you'll want to be careful with, that you could leave your code as is. So instead of doing approximates, just do actuals. You can do a count, and you can do a sum, and you can do a max. You don't have to change your code in order to use approximates. In other words, there are some database initialization parameters. You may want to make a note of this, because this is important. If those parameters are set to enable this feature, you don't have to code your code with these new functions. You can leave them with the old functions. What is Oracle going to do? It could actually, behind the scenes, do what's called a query rewrite and change your code from trying to do an actual to actually doing an approximate. Now, you're going to want to run that through explain plan utility if you're familiar with that, or have a DBA do that, because we don't want it just changing all this code all of a sudden. This is something that would need to be very thoroughly tested, right? So if you're going to change the parameters, it needs really good testing, thorough testing from everybody on the team. If you're not going to turn on the parameters, you just want to do it on a case-by-case basis for certain SQL statements, then code it with the actual new function names in it. Okay, remember the idea behind this is it should run faster. I'm not going to say it will always run faster, but it should run faster. Okay. All right, last one here on 18C, then we'll move into the 19C there. If you ever use the SQL Tuning Advisor, this would be of some interest to you. So the Tuning Advisor has a package called DBMS_SQL Tune. Tuning Advisor is one of those tools that you can pass an SQL statement to it, and it'll give you an analysis of it. Okay, this statement, hey, it looks good as it is, or this statement can be improved by creating some indexes, or this statement is missing statistics, or the statistics aren't up to date, they're stale, or what it could be improved by rewriting it, those types of things. So I like the SQL Tuning Advisor. I find it to be beneficial most of the time. But there's a new package called DBMS_SQL set. So the SQL Tuning Advisor, in addition to just taking a single SQL statement as input, will also can take a group of SQL statements as input, and that's called an SQL set. So you can create an SQL set, that's an old feature, and then you can take that set and you can pass it to the Tuning Advisor and some of the other advisors, things like that. This is just supplying us a new package so that the Tuning Advisor is able to process tuning sets a little bit easier. That's all it's doing. All right, I said that was the last one. Here's actually the last one. This is a quick one though. Schema-only accounts. So schema being a username, okay? Some username that owns certain objects. What we can do in 18C, or you'll see this one maybe listed with 12C as well, is that we can create an actual user ID that doesn't have a password. That's what they're saying here. So we could use that user ID to own all our tables. So somebody can't just log in as that user ID with a password if they knew it and make changes. You can't log in with that user ID. Okay, so it falls into that security type of feature there, right? So 18C, we have the ability to create these schema-only accounts because typically in a production environment, our production objects like tables and procedures and views and such, a lot of times they're owned by a single schema. But we may have multiple people sharing that schema and logging in as that schema with a password, and this prevents that from happening. So a nice little security feature there. And here's an example of that on the next page. If we want to create a new user that has no password, we use this no authentication option. And we can do that later also with alter user. And if we want to see if we have any accounts that are that way, we can query the data dictionary view DBA users, and you can see it down here at the result. App DBA authentication type is none. So that means we can't log in as that user. Okay, some good examples there. All right, here's some 19C ones. These will go fairly quickly. I have less code on these particular ones there. This is if you've ever used the Listagg aggregate function, they've added a new distinct option for it. All right, let's look at an example of this one. I do have an example of this one. Selecting the department number, I have this Listagg function here based on job. All right, so you can see the result down here. It's kind of like using a regular aggregate function like count and max and min and such. So it has a group by like it needs in this case. All right, and so we can see the result down here. We see the department number, and what the Listagg does is it takes the results, instead of going down the page in the result, what you're seeing in the display, it sends the results across the page. So it's a formatting function type of thing. So you can see down here, Department 10 has a clerk, a manager, and a president, but Department 20, we have an analyst, a couple of analysts, a couple of clerks, and a manager. So it shows the duplicates there by default when we do that. If we throw in the distinct keyword like you see on this particular slide, you can see all the duplicates down below were suppressed. So that's pretty cool. If you haven't seen that function, it's a function that it's one of my favorite functions as far as formatting reports and such. We don't always want to see everything just going down the page. Sometimes it's easier to read in this type of format. So that's a new feature. This is 19C now that we're looking at here. All right, SQL quarantine. This is an interesting one. This is related to the feature of the Oracle Resource Manager. So if you're familiar with the Resource Manager, you may not even know it's out there. It's out there. It may not be fully used at this point. The DBAs would set it up. It's out there monitoring the system based on some criteria. It could be governing the system as well. It's kind of like a profile in Oracle, but a lot more features that are added to it. But what happens is the Resource Manager, if it's set up, it can actually terminate processes, SQL statements, for example, that are running based on the resources that they're consuming. So it sets limits. All right, but what happens is it may terminate that SQL, but if that SQL was run again later, the next day, the next week, or whenever, it may use the same plane as it used today when it didn't run very fast. So it doesn't prevent future execution plans that were deemed bad by the Resource Manager. So what it does is, again, in conjunction with the Resource Manager, it will quarantine based on the limits that are set up in the resource manager, the execution plans for certain statements that it flags. So if your SQL statement's out there running, and it exceeds a limit in the resource manager, it's going to get flagged, and the execution plan that went with that statement will be put into quarantine, and the next time that statement's run with that same plan, you're going to get an error message if you're using this particular feature. Now, you may want to make a note of this as well. This SQL quarantine, it's obviously brand new, but as brand new, it's only available with certain configurations. And the expectation is it'll be available in all configurations, but things like Exadata, Exadata is your Oracle complete solution, and this SQL quarantine is available for that. And like I said, Oracle says they'll release it for other environments, editions of Oracle in the future, but they don't specify when that'll be or for which releases, if it's 19C, a later release of it, or if it'll be 20C or 20, whatever letter they put on it. So what this prevents is that statement just, we ran it today and it was slow and got killed, got terminated. We run it tomorrow, it's still using the same plan. Well, why should we expect different results? Well, this isn't going to let you use the same plan. That's the key, that's the benefit. All right, we've seen one that's similar to this. Okay, we're coming up on the end here, not too far from now. Remember in 18C, we had these schema-only accounts that we could create. No passwords, we can't log in with it. This just says if we use any of the default accounts that get set up with an Oracle database, so whoever creates the database, when the database is created, there's a whole bunch of default user names or schemas that are created at the time the database is created, like system or sys. Those are the most common ones that people are familiar with, very powerful usernames. Does not apply to them, but it also sets up things like sample datas and sample schemas like HR or manufacturing or something like that. So you have those out there too, and there's a whole bunch of other ones. So not all of those will apply to this particular feature. So just be aware that some of the schemas that maybe you're logging into now, in future releases, you may not be able to log into them. Now, this doesn't affect any of the accounts that are created for your application and for you and for other people, just for some of those default ones that are out there. They don't really specify too much, which default ones, because I think that they're kind of in the area now of trying to think, oh, are there other ones we want to set up this way? But there could be quite a few that are out there. And you can always, or you or somebody else, if you don't have the privileges, always query the DBA_users view to see what their authentication type is. Okay, that's something to test. If you're upgrading this particular version and you use some of those other schemas, you'll need to check this out, because you may not be able to log into them in a future release. In this case, 19C. If you're a DBA type, maybe this one applies to you a little bit more, but the rest of us developer types may not be even aware that this file exists. But for special privileged users or schemas, there's actually a binary file out on the operating system on the database server where these special users are, their usernames and passwords and their privileges are contained. They're not necessarily in the database itself. They're outside in a special file. What this particular feature does, if that particular file, its name changes or its location change, it's going to go out, and those special users and their privileges, while they're stored in the file, they're also temporarily stored in memory in the database for the instance of the database. So they're not in the database dictionary. So if I went out and changed the location of the file and did not run this command, the alter system command, to flush the new information back into memory, I would not be able to log in as a special user. So this is one of those features where people don't change their password file locations or their names very often, hardly ever actually. But if somebody comes to you and says all of a sudden, I'm working on your thing, John, but I can't get into the system right now because it won't let me log in as my DBA type user or special privileged user. well, this is a good time for you to suggest, hey, maybe it's because of this. You know, is this a database? How long we've been in 19C? Oh, we just upgraded 19C over the weekend. Okay, maybe that's the problem we're having. So if we're having problems logging in as a privileged user, it might be because of this. We just need to run that alter system command, and then voila, it's fixed. Now, this is one that I'm really thinking about doing a future webinar on great detail. It's called automatic indexing. That sounds interesting, doesn't it? All right, you can see it automates certain tasks like creating, rebuilding, dropping indexes in a database based on changes in the workload. Holy cow, there's a lot that goes into this feature. So it's not one that we'll go into details today, but probably in a future webinar, because look at the second sub-bullet there. Captures data, it creates invisible indexes. That's a feature that's been around for a little while. Works with the optimizer, decides if performance can be improved. If it can, makes the invisible indexes visible, and then continues to monitor what's going on in the system. So what it's trying to do is what the DBAs or even the developers try to do is identify, can some of my queries be improved by creating new indexes, getting rid of indexes, changing an index to add columns to it, or whatever. It's doing that all for you. Now, this again would be a feature that I would say needs thorough testing, and you're probably thinking the same thing. All right, there's also a new package down there, DBMS Auto Index package, that we can use to manage this particular feature. I think this is a very interesting feature. This is in 19C. All right, we know that the performance of our queries can be tightly lined up with statistics. You know, how many rows are in a table? How many distinct values are there? You know, we can see all these things. How many blocks do these rows take up? Things like that. We run a query, the optimizer, to come up with an execution plan is looking at these statistics. Well, what if statistics are missing? What if statistics are stale? In other words, they're not accurate within 10% or more type of thing, or whatever you've defined it to be, 10% is the default. There was in 12C, this feature was available there, but only for statements such as, if you did something like this, create table whatever as select something. In other words, a CTAS, a create table as select type statement. So if you did a create table as select in 12C, like release 1 or 2, it would create the table, and as it's loading the data in, it's going to populate the statistics for that particular table automatically. But it would not do that for things like if you did inserts, updates, or deletes. It would not do that automatically. So you'd have to, in 12C, you would have to manually create those, update your statistics. Well, now in 19C, we can turn on this real-time statistics for like your inserts, updates, and deletes, in addition to the CTAS. Because, you know, what happens sometimes is, and hopefully it doesn't happen very often, is that we create a table, maybe it's part of a multi-step process, we load data into the table, and we go to the next step and we forgot to update the statistics on the table because they weren't automatically real time. And so the statistics are missing. But in a later step, I want to access that table, and the optimizer says, hey, wait a minute, there's no statistics for this table. So what am I going to do? I'm going to do a dynamic sample, maybe. So what this is going to do is generate those statistics real time for what it calls conventional DML, insert, updates, and deletes. That might be a helpful feature for us. That we can turn it on and off. So you can see here in the first bullet, there is a hint called no gather optimizer statistics, where we can slap on our insert statement or update statement or whatever. There's certain messages we should look for, like load table conventional. All right. If you looked at the execution plan for an insert, you can run execution plans for other types of SQL, not just select. If you see this particular verbiage, load table conventional, then you know that during this insert statement, it generated real-time statistics. Also, if your statistics were generated real-time, okay, they're out there now. Oh, did these statistics come from real-time gathering, or were they manually put in there by a batch job? Well, if you run an execution plan, I say I load the table and it did dynamic or real-time statistics, and now I run a select against it, and I do an explain plan with it. If I see this little note down here, dynamic statistics use stats for conventional DML, that'll tell me, oh, this is based upon real-time statistics from whenever that was done. Okay. I think this is mainly there. People forget, or their coding isn't quite right, and our tables or database objects, they don't end up with statistics when they should, or they're not updated with the new statistics. So this could be helpful to the optimizer, so that an optimizer wants up-to-date, accurate statistics. I think this will help in that particular area. All right, we're almost to the end here. Hang in there, almost done. High frequency automatic optimizer statistics collection. Wow, that was a lot of stuff there. Some people set this up manually themselves, and this was kind of almost before the real-time statistics too, but what this will do is it creates a batch job automatically when we set it up with the DBMS stats package. It'll go out there, you can see by default every 15 minutes. And it'll update the statistics for us. So it's kind of like scheduled statistics updates, whereas the other one was real time, and then we also have manual or on demand that we can do as well. So just another way to gather statistics that are out there. Sometimes our volumes of data in a particular table changes a lot very quickly. Updating statistics just at night, once a day, sometimes it's not enough. And so maybe we need to update those statistics every 15 minutes there. So this new feature in 19C that allow us to configure that. Again, goes towards performance of your queries, also takes some workload off your DBAs, so they're not having to manage this manually themselves. We can allow Oracle to do it. This is a pretty cool feature here. Again, it kind of goes to your execution plan. But within, there's a package, you may be familiar with this, called DBMS XPlan. That's been out there a while. Has some new functions, one called compare plans and one called diff plans, where we can take an SQL statement that we've already run, and we know its execution plan, and we can use the programs in this package to compare it to other plans as well. So it's a very simple comparison. So for example, let's say you went out there yesterday and you ran your SQL, it ran fine, but you didn't really monitor it, you didn't capture anything about it because it's been out there for a while, you've been running it for months or years or whatever. Today you run it and it's running slow. Okay, this will allow me to go back and compare one plan versus another plan. Did the plan change, in other words? We have other ways to do that too, but this is just a new feature. It's supposed to, again, make comparing different SQL plans, seeing what the difference between them is, because an SQL plan is not always, it's easy to produce, but not always easy to read or easy to interpret. So I think this one has some promise. All right, so the purpose today was just kind of remind ourselves of some of the 18C new features that were out there, because, oh man, here's 19C, and I didn't even get to 18C yet. So everything is a blur at that point. And then also to throw in some 19C new features just from a high level to kind of just make us aware of what's there out there right now. 19C is available out there to download for various operating systems. So lots of different things out there. Like I said, remember, some of these features might be listed as 12C. And not all of them are necessarily available for every edition, like Oracle Enterprise Edition, Standard Edition, Express Edition. Not all these would be available in those, but most people are running in production either Enterprise Edition or Standard Edition. So I think there's a lot of good features there. They're just coming at us really fast, and now we have to make decisions a little bit quicker. Again, thank you for attending today. Here's our web address again, themisinc.com. Here's some upcoming classes, actually with some dates too. So we have some 18C new feature classes coming up in September and October. We also have a troubleshooting PL SQL class in October as well. go out to themisinc.com. Themisinc.com. You can get the contact information. Also, our next webinar will be on Thursday, August 15th at 11:30 a.m. Eastern Time, and it's titled Favorite DB2 SQL Enhancements for Developers. That sounds good. So if you know if you or any of your coworkers that are DB2 type people, steer them to that. They can go out to themisinc.com/webinars and see it listed out there, or there'll be some emails going out for people to register for that as well. And then lastly here, if you have any need for other information, you can go out to our website, or you can also contact John Cacaval. Here's his email address. Again, these slides are available on our website right now, and the recording will be out there shortly, tomorrow or Monday or early next week probably. So you can go out there and get a copy of that. So I hope today, just threw out some new features that maybe you haven't heard of before that causes you to go into it in more detail. Like I said, look for some future webinars that are more detailed on these individual features like automatic indexing or the comparison of execution plans or things like that, that really need the full time of the entire webinar and not just a couple minutes. So thank you again for attending today. Have a good day, and hopefully I'll see you in a future webinar or a future class. Goodbye.